And we also introduced legislation, but we intend to actually take it further this coming year. We did not do a lot with it other than try to find stakeholders to agree to it. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from our presenters on their experiences this legislative year. And with that, I'm going to introduce Heidi Sanborn, and she will tell you about what she's been working on.
Thank you, Marta. Thank you, Marta. I appreciate it. And it's great to be here. I'm sorry I had to miss the sessions this morning. I was unable to get in, so I hope I didn't miss any. I'm sure I did miss some important discussions. Are you going to go ahead and share the screen with the slides, or am I?
You're doing that. Gotcha.
Okay, so then let me go ahead and share my screen, and we'll start at the beginning. Well, thank you all for being here. As you know, I'm Heidi Sanborn. I'm the founding director of the National Stewardship Action Council. We advocate for a circular and equitable economy. We take both very seriously. And I'm going to talk about using policy to catalyze the shift to a circular and equitable economy and how we did that in California this year with SB 54, the packaging EPR bill, but actually it's the first, I believe, in the world, truly circular economy bill. And I'm going to talk about that. So if you don't know who we are, I speak all over the world on these issues. We work on everything from toxics to packaging and beyond, flushable wipes, truth in labeling, all kinds of products. And I've been working in this field for 32 years now, based in Sacramento. So I just want to remind everybody, when people say, can we get to zero waste? The answer is, of course we can get to zero waste. The world was at zero waste. Human beings interrupted natural systems and created chemicals and plastics and things that the earth cannot digest. And that's how we got waste. But that is reversible. And so I just want to remind everybody that the earth is circular and had a circular system until we interrupted it. So to get back to that, we need to implement and really push down this road of achieving a circular and equitable economy. That definition that I follow is from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which says there's 3 key tenets in this order: design out waste and pollution, that includes toxics, keep products and materials in motion, recycling and composting, et cetera, and then go back and repair the natural systems you've damaged. This SB 54 that I'm going to talk about is the only bill in the world that's done that. And we want to decouple economic activity and population growth from the consumption of finite resources. We cannot continue on a straight up population trajectory. We're actually scheduled to hit 8 billion people on this planet next week. When I was born, it was 3. So we are really in trouble here, and we need to move this as quickly as we can. So I want to talk briefly, I don't know if somebody addressed this earlier, but our view of the difference between product stewardship versus EPR is that EPR is mandatory, where the costs are internalized as a cost of doing business. The reason that's key is in order for a company to make money, they want to keep expenses down. And if the shareholders see an expense for recycling, for example, or managing a product of end of life that's very high, they will work to redesign the product, because then they benefit from the redesign cost reduction. Right now, those costs are externalized and they don't care. Product stewardship can be voluntary or mandatory. And to me, it's a visible fee paid by consumers and often managed by producers, such as done in California with mattresses and carpet. But these are the different, just in California, we now have more EPR and stewardship bills than any other state. And these are all the different products that are covered. So I have lots of experience with this. I passed the first EPR bill in the state on mercury thermostats in 2008. And we've learned all the different, how to cherry pick the best policies for what ended up being in SB 54. And we've had to fight very, very hard for some of these bills, including pharmaceuticals and sharps, where it was actually Alameda County passed the ordinance because we couldn't get it at the state level. And it was literally petitioned all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court denied hearing it and upheld the 2 lower courts, ruling that EPR did not violate the Interstate Commerce Clause, and local governments could implement it. And the path to passage was hard. It was very hard. But I just want to point this out, that really hard things can be done passing EPR, especially for a product category as large as packaging and taking on, big pharma, for example. But you have to lay the groundwork and sow the seeds. It takes time. And our state has a lot of experience with bills, which is why we got to this place. We've had a lot of legislative success, which helped lay the groundwork for the packaging bill, the meds and sharps EPR, carpet stewardship, and fixing the original bad bill because we couldn't get anything more. And it's a long story. The speaker was carrying that bill at the time. We've expanded reuse. We've done first in the nation programs, like having the first eco-modulated fee in the US on the carpet bill. So again, our legislators had a lot of experience with these different concepts and policies. But even with that, it took 4 long years and a ballot measure to get SB 54 passed in California this year. It took a lot of work, but look at where we got. A Senate vote of 29-0. By the way, this had to be a 2/3 vote. And 67-2 bipartisan votes in the Assembly. And you can see, these are a lot of the people that I worked with. On the far right at the top is Cal Chamber, far left is Biodegradable Packaging Institute and the Recycling Partnership, all in between, Republic Services. And you can see many, many women at the bottom who worked on this bill, legislators and allies. And all the 5 NGOs in the room are represented by women, including myself. SB 54 is called, actually, this is the shorthand version. It's Packaging Pollution Prevention and Producer Responsibility Act. It requires producers to source reduce the amount of packaging and that they put out on the market. True source reduction, putting that first, which I'm delighted about, requires all material remaining on the market to be recyclable or compostable by 2032. And we have interim metrics to achieve that goal. It's transferring the end-of-life management costs for single-use packaging and food serviceware from the ratepayers back to the producers for the reasons I discussed earlier. And we had a big campaign around this for 4 years. So the act basically says that the producers are going to have to form a producer-run organization. It has to be a 501c3 nonprofit, which is the only one that is for public benefit, not association benefit like a C6 or others. That matters a lot. I can talk about that in the transparency if you have any interest in that. And it's transitioning basically to much more sustainable packaging. We're going to be putting a lot less plastic on the market, which means less plastic in the environment. So some of the key elements, we actually have reuse and refill targets. I don't think anybody else in the nation has them. I know some people criticized that 4% by 2030 was not enough, but it's the first, and I'm very proud of it. Would we have liked more? Yes, but of course, there's a lot to building a refill and reuse system from scratch. Packaging optimization is key. Long-term goals for source reduction. Again, even giving CalRecycle more authority to go beyond the 25% source reduction of plastics goal. Sustainable packaging. We have rates and dates, as I said, for recycling. And the producers are going to run this whole thing with a lot of oversight and transparency and big, big hammers on enforcement, which I fought very hard to get in the bill. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And then again, eco-modulation. So whatever producers sell into the market, they will have to be paying a fee to the producer-run organization that's eco-modulated based on the impacts of that product, whether it's recyclable or not, or compostable or not, or toxic or not. That's all going to play into that eco-modulated fee. And then we fund $5 billion of new, funding for new infrastructure and mitigation, which I can talk about briefly too. And 12 minutes is not much to talk about this bill, so I'm going to go fast. Again, 25% source reduction mandate, 10% has to come from elimination or reuse and refill, with minimum targets of 4% of reuse and refill by 2030. Other reduction tools can be lightweighting, concentrating, shifting to another packaging type, Recycled content is considered an alternative compliance method to source reduction. It is not source reduction. I fought against that. And it's capped at 8%. So that means they cannot do unlimited recycled content and achieve any goals. States CalRecycle has authority to increase the rates, as I said, to ensure that the reductions are maintained. Now, ongoing, 75% of single-use plastics, but 25% have to go away. But again, they have to be, recyclable and hit our definitions of recyclable by 2032 at the latest. And the source reduction timeline, 30% by 2028, 40% by 2030, and 65% of all single-use plastic packaging and foodware must be fully recyclable and compostable by 2032. The implementation timeline. Producers are going to fund or start their PRO by 2024, and I can tell you they're already working on it. A lot of consultants are getting hired to do a lot of work. By 2027, you're not going to be able to sell covered material into the state without being part of the producer-run organization. And again, I have to go through this very quickly. Sustainable packaging is deemed by CalRecycle as recyclable per the law I helped pass and sponsor the year before, SB 343, which determined what is recyclable. And that means nothing that includes intentionally added PFAS, for example, or inks and dyes and things that are contaminants. And they have true recycling rates of 60% or more by mid-2025. So 54, the packaging EPR bill built on the prior year's labeling bill and truth in labeling. And I encourage you to go in that order. If you're going to do these bills, putting it together could be very, very, very complicated. And I don't think we would have gotten this bill if we hadn't done that first. The rates and dates to ensure the material has true markets are below. 65% again is the minimum by 2032. And then again, how they structure their PRO is a lot up to the producers, but it covers all material types. And they can do a separate PRO after the first 7 years, but there has to be only one for the first 7 as we need all the money and infrastructure built up. The PRO will develop a plan and a budget. They have annual reports. They have to update the plan every 5 years. And the PRO fully covers the cost to comply and cost to local government and haulers to meet the goals that they have for recycling, et cetera. So there's huge penalties, $50,000 a day per violation. And the one I'm most proud of that I fought very hard for was that CalRecycle can revoke the PRO for being out of compliance. I've never seen this before, but based on our experience with the carpet industry, I fought very hard for this because I think this is such a massive, powerful group of manufacturers. We should be able to take the keys away if they're driving drunk and they're not doing the program that the public is going to benefit from. So we did get that in the bill, and I encourage everybody to look at putting that in their bill. These are very big companies that can pay very large fines, and we need to have tools that will actually keep them working in the right direction. Now, mitigation. We got $500 million a year for 10 years from the producers of plastic covered materials to pay for California's cleanup of all that remediation part I talked about in the circular economy. 150 million will come from the plastic resin manufacturers. 350 million comes from the other producers. But this is very powerful, and 60% of this funding, remember I talked about equitable economy too? 60% will go to low income, disadvantaged and rural communities. And we're very, very proud of that. It's a total of $5 billion, by the way. So we got lots of press on this bill. Won't get into all of it. All the states' bills are slightly different. I wouldn't say slightly. Some are very, very different. And ours is very, very different. There's not one EPR for packaging. And I encourage you to get into the details. That is where the devil lives. If you don't know about previous bills and how they've worked and what language worked or didn't work, please call me. I'm happy to help you. But as I said, we've had more bills pass and have different issues and had to go back and fix them sometimes than any other state. And if you have any questions or your legislator, you can contact Senator Ben Allen's office directly. Tina Andolina is this amazing staff person that really facilitated this. coming to fruition, and they'd be happy to talk to you. So that's it in a nutshell. I'm happy to turn it over to the next speaker.
Thanks, Heidi. This is Martha. I just wanted to thank you so much and introduce Rachel from Colorado. Very different, as you mentioned, EPR legislation. Yeah, they do not have a bottle bill, and they actually have less curbside recycling, a lot less in Colorado than California. So they're trying to address a lot of other issues. So I think it's great to have you both here.
Thanks, and I'll stop sharing my screen, and I'll say that we did have a bottle bill, and we exempted the bottle bill materials from our packaging bill.
Hi, everyone. I just want to say thanks for being here, and thank you, Heidi, for setting the stage on our presentation today. Let me minimize this. So, yes, I'm going to talk about Colorado's EPR bill that we passed this last legislative session, House Bill 22-1355, which is for packaging, printed paper, packaging and printed paper, which makes it pretty unique among some bills. Quickly, though, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Rachel Setsky. I'm the Senior Policy and Research Associate with EcoCycle. We are one of the nation's oldest and largest nonprofit recyclers. We operate the Boulder County Recycling Center. We have a fleet of recycling trucks, and we also do advocacy and education on recycling. Pull this out of the way here. And a little background, as was just mentioned, on Colorado's recycling. We are one of the worst in the nation at recycling. And for the purposes of this bill, that was actually sort of helpful. We could get out there and say, we really need to do something to improve our recycling. We have a 16% recycling rate, which is half the national average. This is a large part due to the fact that we are mostly open market and have private haulers and trash and recycling collection, meaning that most residents have to opt into recycling programs. They have to subscribe, and they often have to pay more for recycling. We have very few cities and towns that manage recycling services, either by hauling recycling themselves or by contracting with companies to do that. As has been mentioned, we have no bottle bill, and we have very limited waste policies. In terms of the bottle bill, our policy does allow for a bottle bill in the future. That it was important consensus that we all agree, or that most stakeholders agreed that we really needed to build out our recycling infrastructure before we turn to a bottle bill, but that we did not want to preclude a bottle bill from happening at some point. And politically, we did have both parties at the state legislature were both bodies were controlled by Democrats, as well as having a Democratic governor. We do very much have business-friendly and libertarian leanings in the state, though. So we have had a good environment for passing this law, but also really needed to be inclusive of different viewpoints, and I'll get to that more. As others have said, our bill did not happen overnight. Similar to California, we've had years of working on policies. And actually, one of the things that we started from the beginning, 6 years ago, was the State of Colorado Recycling Report. This report we have used to leverage the data in the state, which is very limited, to say, not only do we not know much about how we're recycling in the state, but we do know that we need to improve our recycling. And that report was a great resource to get local elected officials and state elected officials talking about recycling and the importance of recycling so that they could move policy forward. I bring that up just if you're not wondering where you can start as a state, if you haven't already started taking steps, some sort of data gathering and presentation of that data is super helpful place to start. And then we've had other education efforts going on at the legislative level. We, in 2019, invited a number of legislators to take a tour of recycling facilities, and nothing gets legislators excited about recycling as seeing a MRF in operation and watching the process happen. And then, of course, this last year, we passed both two major bills, this producer responsibility bill, as well as an end market development bill. I won't go through all of these 6 bullets, but this graphic here, which you can find on our website, which I have a link to later, is these are really our talking points about how this bill is going to benefit Colorado. And we really tried to get the environmental impact, the diversion impact, the equity, making sure that we had apartments and rural areas that were going to be covered, and the economic industrial business impact of this bill, so that we were covering all angles of the benefit of a producer responsibility bill. Has been mentioned by a number of speakers already today, but our bill would not have passed if we did not have a broad coalition of folks that were working on this. Recycle Colorado is our state membership organization of entities that are interested in moving recycling forward in our state. It includes local municipalities, nonprofits like EcoCycle.
Rachel, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're not seeing your slides move forward.
Oh.
Do you want to try to stop your share and share again?
Sure. Have you seen any of them?
Just the really great one with all the photos.
Hey. Oh. I just got a note that Zoom quit. Are you hearing me?
We hear you. Yeah, you're fine.
Okay.
Do you want to try to share your screen again?
Yeah, I can see.
Yep. You can see him now? Okay.
I see the broad coalition of support. Thank you.
Okay. Can you still see it now that I'm in? Now that it's full screen?
No.
No, okay. I'm going to just go back. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to keep it in non-presenter mode and go from there. As I was saying, Recycle Colorado is a membership organization. We really led this bill through Recycle Colorado, but we could not have gotten it done without the support of local elected leaders through our state coalitions of municipalities, and without tremendous support from the business community. The American Beverage Association and some of our Colorado businesses, such as Ball Corporation and New Belgium Brewing, were tremendously helpful, and we would not have succeeded without their help. It's been mentioned a couple times that Colorado's producer responsibility bill has the most responsibility from producers. It is an industry-funded and operated nonprofit management system. The PRO, the Producer Responsibility Organization, they are responsible for managing and funding the entire program. We intentionally did not stipulate the operations or the governance of the PRO within the bill. We wanted to leave that up to them, but we did require that they have a broad and diverse board so that their board members represent not just major corporations, but also smaller businesses as well. In the bill, there can be one PRO to start. That PRO will be recognized in 2023, but we can have additional PROs starting 2029, and like other states, there is the option for individual businesses to have their own plan if they want to. So again, the difference between Colorado and some of the other bills, the materials that are covered, any type of packaging must pay into the system, whether it is recyclable or not. So that includes all consumer-facing packaging, bottles, containers, cardboard, cans. It does include printed paper, and that was a really big issue to us. We really wanted to have that printed paper included. We also included food service packaging, and this is in part because we see a lot of that food service packaging showing up in the recycling stream. It's often a contaminant, and we wanted to make sure that the producers of those materials were paying into the system, even though food service packaging is seldom recyclable. As I've mentioned, the PRO is going to pay for 100% of the recycling costs. This includes collection and transportation, processing, education, infrastructure investments. And I really want to underscore the importance of this, particularly the transportation. Colorado has a lot of rural area that just does not have access to recycling. And a large part of that is because the cost of transporting that material from some corners of our state to where the markets are can be really, really burdensome on those programs, and it just isn't cost effective for them. So having the entire cost covered was huge for us. The program to begin with will cover all single family and multifamily residents. Our wording is very similar to other bills in that all of Coloradans will have access to recycling that is equal to their access to trash collection services. And starting in 2028, that the covered entities may expand. So it might expand beyond just residential and then also include some small businesses, governments, parks, schools, and other places that the PRO and the state will work together to identify. So while our program is producer run, there is a lot of oversight in the system and the way we built it. So the brand owners will pay into the producer responsibility organization. The producers will then pay local governments, haulers, MRFs, processors to do not only the collection and processing services, but also they are required to work with existing organizations that are already doing education to build on the businesses and the programs that are already in place to expand recycling, not to throw out what we've already got and replace it with something new. At the same time, the producer responsibility organization must work with the state appointed advisory board to create the pieces of the program. So they'll consult with them on our needs assessment, which is going to happen starting next September. And then also they will work with the advisory board to get feedback on their plan and on annual reports. The advisory board also has the task of recommending to the state agency whether or not they approve of the plan and the needs assessment that the producer responsibility organization is putting forth. And the ultimate approval lands with the state agency, which in our state is the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. They have the ultimate sign off on the program and how it goes forward, and they also have the responsibility for enforcing the program. Some of the sticking points that have come up, I know in a lot of bills, are on this slide, and I just wanted to give Colorado's input on them. As I've mentioned multiple times, paper was huge. We insisted that paper be included in our bill because it is such a large part of the recycling stream, and it needs to pay in. All of the materials going into the system must pay in. Toxics was a big discussion here, and our stakeholders really did end up agreeing that while we want to see the reduction of toxics, outside of the eco-modulated fees, which will have the opportunity to address some of that toxic, we really believe that it needed to be handled through other bills. At the same time as this bill was going through the legislature, one of our sponsors was actually running a PFAS bill at the same time, and that passed as well. So we really wanted to keep them separate to make them more impactful. Chemical recycling, as was mentioned during the plenary, absolutely, our definitions include that no waste to energy, no burning can be included in recycling rates. We do allow for new technologies, but there's some pretty strict guidelines on what standards you have to meet to prove that the new technology is needed and environmentally sound. Scope of services, as I've talked about already, we're starting with residential and we'll expand. And the recycling targets, I know California's bill has very specific targets in it. We actually, because of our lack of data in the state, really didn't want to put solid targets in the bill. So what we've done instead is we have created this needs assessment, as I mentioned, that'll start next September. And that, based on the findings of that needs assessment, the PRO will propose 3 different scenarios. Right now, I mentioned we are at 16% recycling rate. So based on the needs assessment, we predict the PRO will come back with, you know, maybe 25, 50, 75%. That the made up numbers, we don't know what they'll be, but they'll say in order to get to these 3 numbers, we need to put this much money in, we need to do these types of things to get there. They'll propose that to the advisory board, to CDPHE, and then ultimately the state legislature will pick one of those 3 scenarios and say, yes, this is the goal that you need to meet. And at that point, the PRO will know what their recycling targets are to move forward. Timeline, I've already mentioned a number of these things, so I won't go into detail, but the advisory board and the PRO will be selected next year, or advisory board will be starting next year. And by 2026, we will have free recycling, well, implementation of the program to get free recycling to all Coloradans moving forward. Not sure how I'm doing on time here, but my last
you're over right now.
Okay, thanks, so this is just my last slide. Just want to say our website here, Recycling for All Coloradans, we have left our campaign materials up there. We are happy for other states to use them. Please send me an email if you want any of these materials or if you're looking for any other assistance.
Thank you so much. These are complicated bills. These are not small bills. So I know it's difficult to squeeze it into with the time that we gave. Next, we have Christine here from Hawaii. So aloha, Christine.
Hi, I'm Christine Kubat. I'm the Executive Director of Recycle Hawaii. We're an organization that's been active here in Hawaii in recycling, but also very much in the zero waste space for over 30 years. And so now this is a check-in. I want everybody to just like take a breath because, wow, that was a lot. And say, first of all, full disclosure, not everybody, I'm not speaking on behalf of everybody in Hawaii when I lay out this plan, but I'm speaking on behalf of people who were able to get a bill introduced and to get it to the conference committee. And so this is what we did and what we're about. And this is a good chance for me to check in with anybody who's reacting to the pink and the purple and the kind of the artsiness of my presentation, because the point that I want to make in choosing these colors and choosing a style of presentation is that this approach to these complex, what are also called wicked problems, can be artful as much as they are science. They can be simple, they can be elegant. So strap in because that's what we're going to talk about now. So Hawaii, what's different about Hawaii? I have someone that's advancing my slides. Thanks. We're bounded on all sides by ocean, 2,000 miles from domestic recycling infrastructure. We've got the smallest economy of any US state. So when we sit here and we put our heads together in Hawaii and say, what is our contribution to the national movement? I think there is room for us to do something that is very different and is as unique as we are. And then how does this tie into things that are being done, for instance, in California, which has the 5th largest economy in the world? Yeah, that was the bottom line, the foundation for what we decided to do. So what is EPR? I won't spend too much time on this because a lot of people talked about it in greater detail, but I will bring it up because we have been accused of not being a real EPR bill. And I'm going to encourage people to kind of think that over. And let's go. We went with a simple definition, movement that aims to reduce the impacts of consumerism by transferring some portion of waste handling costs. And I'll emphasize that with the next slide. From municipalities to producers. So we're not going along with this idea that everything has to be put onto the producers. We're the Aloha State, we're into sharing, we're into like working together as a family. You know, this is kind of energy we're bringing to the space. So we thought, well, let's be a little bit experimental there and talk about what the producers should be accepting responsibility for as far as their engagement with us and what they should not. So the heart of the concept is the very good work that's being done by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and the UN Environmental Program, that their global commitment for a new plastics economy, because let's face it, a lot of what's driving us to be active in this area is plastic pollution. And we're very concerned about that in Hawaii. I feel like we have a special obligation because we are in an environment that is highly corrosive to plastic, and we're surrounded by ocean. So like all of the microplastics that we're shedding are going directly into the waterways. And we also had a very strong influence from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of how active Neil Seldman was in educating people about the potential problems with PROs. We really took that stuff to heart because, again, here in our small island communities, we do want to be more self-reliant. And we do, once these materials get shipped all the way across the ocean and they're here, there's a great potential for them to be resources for us. So we didn't want to let go of that. And we went into this pretty much convinced no PRO. Another important influence, Hawaii loves zero waste. So, you know, we are really coming from a zero waste space. And I think the major difference between what we're presenting and what others might be presenting is that we're not coming from a recycling space to EPR. We're coming from a zero waste space because that's the people who are most motivated to take up this issue, to rally support, to get testimony. That's where we were coming from. Okay, so going back to that idea of how are we going to engage producers? And this is very much being styled as an invitation. We want you to come to Hawaii. We want you to work with us. How are we going to engage you? So again, going to the global commitment for a new plastics economy. What is the initiative that they've laid out? Eliminating unnecessary plastic items, check. Innovating, so all necessary plastics can be safely reused, recycled, or composted, check. Circulating necessary plastic in the economy while keeping it out of the environment. Very important to us. We are not supporting plastic reformation schemes where we're collecting waste plastic and turning it into fences or benches where it sits out in the sun and the salt air and degrades and goes into the ocean. Okay, next. So when you look at the global commitment for a new plastics economy, you see of the top 20 producers, 16 are already signatories to this initiative. So that means they've made that commitment. And yes, we've seen slides about, you know, the commitment they made and where they're at and are they there or not, but they've done it. They've made public forward-facing statements, claims saying that they are going to follow this initiative. So we're like, good, great, let's start there. And the ones in orange are the ones that have made the commitment. The ones in blue have not. Okay, so now we get to that part of what level of responsibility as far as engaging with us do we want the producers to take on? And this is like the most important point that I hope to make is that we want to keep the producers upstream. We want to just like almost fence them in up there and say, look, you know what, it's all there. Because I really feel that a lot of what's happening downstream and all of this this extra layer of bureaucracy and all this oversight and all this talk about hammers is really the result of a miscalculation of how much things are going to change once these upstream innovations kick in. Think about it. If the design choices are such that everything is truly recyclable, compostable, or reusable, there's going to be such a significant drop in the volume of what's being handled downstream. And so I don't think it's necessary to go out and to create all of this recycling infrastructure, all this oversight, all this management, you know, until we really see how that plays out. So that was a lot of our thinking. And again, promoting this idea of transitional EPR, that there's this period of time where we're moving from a system that makes waste to a system that doesn't make waste. And yes, absolutely, producers need to pay for that. But eventually we're looking to get to a place where the money that's coming into the municipalities through the tax base is more than enough because we're just not wasteful people anymore. Okay, so finally to the bill, after telling you the underlying concepts. we are engaging the top producers of fast-moving consumer goods. They register with the state of Hawaii. They pay into an EPR fund over a 5-year period, transitional. Corporations that generate more than 10,000 metric tons of packaging waste and sell more than $500 million worth of fast-moving consumer goods are subject to its provisions. They pay $100 per ton for each ton of packaging waste they produced. We did talk to some of the big producers, and they asked us if they could estimate the amount of packaging waste. And we were like, fine. Because again, the thing is, we want this to be, we're open, we're going to be innovative, we're going to be creative, we're engaging, we want to work together. It's just, we wanted to make it easy for them to interact. And why? Because there's so little progress, negligible progress being made on reuse. So go to the next slide. And that is what our bill is all about, is reuse. We are not looking to recycling as the strategy that's going to work. We're looking at reuse. So in the first year, each county conducts a needs assessment. They do this funded by money from the fund that was put in by the producers. There's a little bit of confusion. It's not that the needs assessment is actually going to drive the program, but again, we're going back to this idea of shared responsibility. So what do the counties need to do? They need to come up with a needs assessment, because what we see in the budgeting processes here is that they never budget. They never really decide what they need to be zero waste or to reduce waste significantly. They just make their budget to make waste, and then they're like, oh, there's no money left for recycling, sorry. So the money, the rest of the money in the fund goes to cover the cost of developing the needs assessments, but then the additional funding goes towards reuse, pilot programs, that's it. Subsequent years, once the needs assessments are done, the reuse programs are all that get funded. Hawaii Department of Health disperses funds through a competitive grant program. The producers can apply for funding. They can partner with local nonprofits. Nonprofits can do it on their own. County waste management divisions can apply on their own. We want this to be highly competitive because we want the very best ideas to come forward. And what's left out here is there are actual companies like Algramo and Closed Loop. They get in there, they get access to that pot of funding, and here we go. Next. So how does this impact Hawaii producers and retailers? There is not a single Hawaii-based producer or retailer that meets the engagement threshold. And we did this on purpose because we didn't want to go to battle with producers, and we didn't want to make the mom and pop shops who were just out there taking the same packaging off the shelf that all the big producers use and say, hey, it's up to you, this is on you. No, we're engaging with the producers who have the resources, who have the market share to really change upstream packaging designs and to set a whole new standard there. And the businesses here, again, they'll benefit because as we see this evolution, as we see these mandates in California kicking in, these changes happening, everybody will follow suit. Okay, the big pushback we have, and there hasn't been much, I'll have to say that. The idea is really new and people are kind of like, what? It's catching them by surprise. But the short time frame does not justify an increase in prices. Again, we're going back to this transitional idea, and that costs are spread over a global market share of $500 million or more. So the position we're taking is, no, they're not going to add extra money to products that are being sold in Hawaii to punish us for doing this. The money for these reuse programs are going to come from their marketing, even possibly their public relations, product development. There you go. Okay, so finally, next slide. Aloha, that's us. That word has a lot of meanings to it. It could be the way to say goodbye, but also the way to say hello. We are open. We are offering this as a partnership. And I'm going to unashamedly ask everyone who's listening to this to please get on board and support this legislation. We will be reintroducing it. And the idea is that there's so little progress being made on reuse. So because that's so important, we need to get in there. We need to find a way to engage producers, to set the stage for these innovations to occur. Hawaii is the perfect place to do that. Small economy, people come here from all over the world. And I could even see in listening to Heidi's presentation, she's got her reuse strategies, basically, or mandates kicking in 2027. Our rulemaking is going to be short. And our time to get this program up and running is going to be short. So we could very well be, with your support, innovating out here in Hawaii within the next couple of years, and then having these major corporations already field tested, piloted, gotten feedback out here in Hawaii and said, okay, 2027 in California, we're ready to roll based on the foundation that we laid in the work that we did in Hawaii. So again, I would really ask everybody to support our concept, and we'll be sending out notices. You can submit testimony and just really help us, because we're committed to focusing on reuse strategies in the EPR space.
Thank you, Christine. That was wonderful. And when do you expect to be reintroducing that legislation?
This next legislative session in January.
That's excellent. Okay, so everybody can get on board there. I'm just going to open it up for some questions that have come in. I know that Heidi, you had a few questions. If we could maybe just focus in on the point that Christine just made about what the time frame is going to be when they get the study done and they actually start kicking in on some of these things. Could we focus on that?
You mean when the producers start working on things?
Well, hopefully they're already working on things. But
they are.
Yeah. So when will you see some action, though, as far as the time frame Christine just mentioned, till they actually start funding programs in California?
Well, if you're speaking about reuse, which of course we always put first, after design for the environment, we have minimums in the bill and goals and hard targets. I didn't see in Hawaii that they're having a target and mandates for the big brands to do this. And I wouldn't be giving public money to the big brands to figure it out, quite frankly. I think they need to do it on their own dime. Thank you very much. So our bill, the way it's written, there's minimums and they can exceed them. The other thing that's kind of cool is we did it started with commercial paper because the cardboard folks did not want to be in the bill. Said, look, the commercial cardboard is at 68% or so recycling rate. We've already set up all the infrastructure and the balers. We don't want to be in the PRO and have to pay for somebody else to do what we're already doing. We said, okay, but it can't be material specific. It's going to be all materials that if they, on the commercial side, because we do both commercial and residential in our bill, if they hit 70% plus and they can verify to Cal Recycle that they're at 70% plus recycling rate, they get exempted if they like out of paying into the PRO. So that's a very big incentive to go well beyond the minimum recycling rates too, which I like. But I think timing, I've got multiple slides on the calendar. It's pretty clear. I can tell you that Cal Recycle pushed back on some of the dates we wanted to have earlier, like giving money out to communities to clean up California, because they wanted more time to do the regulations. We would have much preferred getting that on the street a lot sooner, but they said 2027. We had no choice.
I'd like to ask Heidi what she meant by not giving public money to the producers, because is that maybe a misconception about what
maybe I understood, maybe I misunderstood what you said, but I thought you were saying that the producers were able to apply for the grants.
Yeah, they can compete, they can apply for their own money. I mean, this goes to the idea that producers do want to have some kind of say. They're concerned about giving their money over to municipalities or to the private sector, to nonprofits, and not getting anything out of it. So that's a way to say to them, yeah, come on, compete, give your best idea. It's more likely that they would form partnerships with whoever's making the grant application, but the money's coming from the producers. It goes into the fund. Anybody can access it. And if the producers want to, make a good cause, yeah, why not? Why shouldn't they be to use their own money?
It is their money though. Okay, good. Well, I'm glad I misunderstood it. Good. Yeah, I mean, if it's their money, that's fine. It's kind of a long way to get them to do it, but that's whatever it takes. And I've said all along, every state is different. Politics are different. Aloha State is very different than, our state, the Golden Bear State. So we just do what we can do. And I know Colorado had a very different situation too. So that's one of the things I would like to say is there are people, out there who came swinging really big bats at all of our bills. I would urge you to be very careful with your bats. Just because it isn't exactly what you want doesn't mean that you understand the politics on the ground and what's possible. Those of us who are under the hood are working on dancing on pinheads, making these negotiations. We know all the players, and you could kill the bill. And if you do, you can always build off of a bill. You can always correct it. You can, whatever. But the day our bill passed, we started getting, manufacturers of packaging actually started getting calls from customers they had been begging to try and go from film plastics to paper fiber solutions in packaging, saying, California did it. What do we do to comply? Like, how do we keep selling? Like, the phone started ringing the next day. That means that they're already thinking about making the switch and on packaging. And so I would say we're out of time. The climate is on fire. We really need to get going. And if you can get 95% there or more, and I would say ours is closer to 99%, then go, but be careful about going onto other people's playing fields and start swinging bats when you don't understand everything going on.
And that's a great point. I was going to ask Rachel what her perspective is on that as she came to agreements and what she thought of as big bats.
Absolutely. I love what you just said, Heidi. Thank you very much. We are very much our own situations from state to state. That said, though, I mean, we took other states' bills. We looked through so many bills as we wrote our language, and we unashamedly grabbed this definition from this bill or this wording from that bill. But then there was other stuff that we're like, what? None of the other bills fit Colorado. And we workshopped it through, our folks in the rural area, our folks in the metro area, and found even there were different wording within our state. And so we really had to figure out what wording was already out there that was great wording and that was very similar, and what really worked for us. But thank you very much for that point. And it's got to be collaborative with business and government and nonprofits, the people that are on the ground doing it. And there are so many people, great minds out there working on these bills, that if you're considering it in your own state, reach out and ask what you can learn from other states. I would just leave it with that.
I'd like to advance the idea that the states do some experimentation. So we see these really big bills, like what's going to happen in California is going to impact the entire US. And there's a lot of things that we don't have to do in Hawaii because Heidi and the people in Colorado are doing what they're doing. They're not going to come up with different packaging for Hawaii because we don't have an EPR bill. And at the same time, I believe that we should come together and really start pushing for national, federal legislation, because to me, that's where we're going to get the conformity that the producers are looking for. We see them going around state to state, trying to get every state to come up with a Colorado style bill because, they like that. They're in control. And so I think we should push back against that, let Colorado play out, let California play out a little bit, let us experiment out here in Hawaii, but we should all come together and start pushing for federal legislation. And then my caution there is going to be keep the producers upstream as much as we possibly can, get them to do every last thing they need to do upstream. And then let's talk about what happens downstream, because I think it's going to revolutionize what happens downstream once these provisions for redesign kick in.
I'd like to add, I totally agree with Christine's point that, turn the spigot off first, then size the system. That makes the most cost-effective sense. However, I will caution, if we start pushing for national legislation before we have enough power and before we're ready, our side being, really organized on a lobbying strategy and a messaging strategy and all this, chances are very good that they can take control of the messaging and roll us. And then we don't get the bill we want. And they could preempt states. So we have to be very, very careful about, touching that national thing. And if the companies wanted harmony, what I keep telling them is come to the table and you won't be on the menu. But when you fight, you get the sausage factory in every state, and you're going to get what you get. I've always told industries, if you want harmony, you've got to lead, you've got to come up with a plan, say, this is what we can live with, let's negotiate, and let's see if we can get this harmonized. But they haven't been doing that. And that's why we end up with patchwork rules.
So we're right at the end of our hour here, and this is a very in-depth topic. If each of you want to put your contact information into the chat, give people a chance to copy that. We've been watching everything here in Illinois. We had a legislator who copied Maine's, I believe it was Maine's, EPR for packaging, and we've been workshopping that all year and trying to find solutions, and there's definitely sausage making, as Heidi said. So and every state is different, so I do think eventually we'll have to get somewhere nationally, but I agree we need to take it state by state for a while now, and relieve our municipalities a little bit on the burden, and our MRFs, of trying to do everything that keeps coming down the pike. So thank you, ladies. It was very informative.
Thanks for having us. And I put in the chat a link to our SB 54 working group if anybody would like to be part of that and be really in the weeds on the regulations development in California. I think it's going to be informative. Excellent. Nice to speak with you, ladies. Christine and Rachel, thanks for being here.
You as well.
Thanks, everyone. We have a 5-minute break until the next session. Actually, yeah, 5 minutes. So you can just go grab some water, a snack, and then come back to the session of your choice at the after the break.